They thought she was just another woman enjoying her meal, quiet and unassuming, the kind of face you'd forget the moment you left the room. But what they didn't know was that she was once part of the most elite fighting force in the world, the Navy SEALs, and in just 17 seconds she was about to show them exactly what that meant. Before we dive in, if you love your mom and dad, hit that subscribe button and show some love to her, because this story is one you'll never forget. It began on a crisp Friday evening at Bella's Italian Bistro, a cozy little restaurant tucked away on a corner street, filled with the smells of garlic and baked bread, the sound of forks against plates, and the low chatter of families and couples enjoying the end of their week. Claire Donovan, mid-30s, sat near the window alone, her posture straight but not rigid, her green eyes sharp yet softened by the casual glow of the restaurant lights. She wore simple jeans and a navy blouse, blending into the crowd, but there was something about her that stood out if you looked closely enough, the way her head turned ever so slightly when the door opened, the way her gaze lingered on every reflection in the glass, the way she sat, balanced, grounded, as though every muscle was always prepared. Claire had left the SEALs 5 years ago, but what the military had built inside her never truly left. She had learned to hide it in the quiet of civilian life, working as a consultant, spending her evenings like this, quietly, anonymously. But fate doesn't always let the past rest. The door burst open and in stumbled 3 men, loud, rowdy, reeking of alcohol even from a distance. They shoved past a hostess without waiting to be seated, laughing like hyenas as their boots scraped against the hardwood floor. Diners turned heads, mothers pulled children closer, but the men didn't care. They had come in looking for trouble. When their eyes landed on Claire sitting alone, they smirked in unison. She caught their gaze in the reflection of the window before they ever made their move. In that instant she knew, they weren't here for dinner, they were here to prove something, to someone, maybe even to themselves. And unfortunately for them, they had picked the wrong target. The first man swaggered over, dropping himself into the empty chair across from her without asking. "What's a pretty girl like you doing alone?" he slurred, leaning in with a grin that was more predatory than charming. Claire's eyes didn't flinch. She set her fork down neatly, her voice calm. "I'm fine. You should join your friends." His buddies snickered behind him, encouraging him. The second man chimed in, "Don't be shy, sweetheart. We're just looking for some company." She glanced at them all once, her expression unreadable, but inside her mind ticked like a clock. Their movements, their angles, the exits, the distance of every table and chair around her, it was all calculation. The first man reached out, grabbing her wrist as though he had a right to it. In that instant, something inside her shifted. The restaurant seemed to slow, the chatter gone, the air heavy. Claire's body reacted before her thoughts even caught up. With a sharp twist she broke his grip, forcing his wrist back at a painful angle, his face crumpling in shock. She rose from her chair in one fluid motion, driving the edge of her palm into his forearm, sending him stumbling backward with a howl. The second lunged clumsily, swinging wide. Claire ducked low, her shoulder slamming into his torso as she pivoted, sweeping his legs out from under him so hard he collapsed onto the floor, gasping. The third, the largest of the group, roared and charged, his fist raised like a hammer. Claire sidestepped, catching his momentum and driving her elbow into his ribs before hooking her foot behind his ankle and yanking. He crashed into a table, sending plates and glasses shattering to the ground. 17 seconds. That was all it took. The entire restaurant was silent. Diners stared in shock, waiters frozen mid-step, a child whispering, "Wow," to his mother. Claire straightened calmly, adjusted her blouse, and sat back down. Her pasta was still warm. The 3 men groaned on the floor, stunned, humiliated, their bravado shattered as quickly as it had appeared. The first tried to push himself up again, but Claire's voice cut like steel. "Stay down. You don't want me to finish this." It wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of a woman who had once given orders that meant life or death. He froze, collapsing back onto the floor. A waitress whispered nervously, "Should we call the police?" Claire gave a simple nod. Yes. Make sure they don't bother anyone else tonight. As the staff scrambled for the phone, Claire took another bite of her dinner. To everyone else, it looked effortless, but inside her chest she felt the pulse of something she thought she had buried, the old rhythm, the old fire. She had promised herself she would never go back to that life. She had walked away from the SEALs because she wanted peace. Yet here she was, 17 seconds away from who she used to be. When the police arrived, they dragged the men out, shouting curses and empty threats, but not one of them dared look her in the eye. An officer approached her, confusion painted on his face. "Ma'am, we've got to ask, how'd you take down 3 men like that?" Claire smiled faintly, her tone casual. "Just a little self-defense." But there was one man in the restaurant who recognized her movements instantly. An elderly veteran, wearing a faded cap with navy pins, had been watching quietly from a corner table. He walked over slowly, his eyes sharp despite his years. "Seal?" he asked softly, so no one else would hear. Claire held his gaze for a long second, then gave the slightest nod. "Once." He tipped his cap. "Thought so." That was textbook precision. 17 seconds flat. She gave a faint smile, nothing more. He walked away with respect in his stride, leaving her once again in the quiet anonymity she preferred. But her anonymity wouldn't last. A young woman at another table had recorded the whole thing on her phone, posting it online before the police had even left. By morning, the video would explode across social media, millions of views, headlines about the mysterious woman who dismantled 3 attackers without breaking a sweat. People debated her identity. Was she ex-military? An undercover cop? A professional fighter? Claire, meanwhile, wanted none of it. She slipped out of the restaurant after paying her bill, disappearing into the night. But the story didn't end there. 2 days later, a black SUV pulled up in front of her modest suburban home. Out stepped Commander Harris, her former SEAL team leader, a man she hadn't seen since she left the service. "You made quite the scene the other night," he said, his voice steady but knowing. Claire frowned. "I didn't ask for it. They forced my hand." He nodded. "Doesn't change the fact the world saw you. You've been off the grid for years, but now people are asking questions. And not just civilians." Her stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" Harris sighed. "One of those men you put down has connections, bad ones. Words already spreading in circles you don't want to be mentioned in. They're going to come looking." For the first time since that night, Claire felt a pang of unease. She had thought it was over, her missions, her enemies, all buried with her past. But Harris's presence told her otherwise. "What do you want from me?" she asked. He studied her with the same steel gaze he had years ago. "I want you ready. Because whether you like it or not, you're back in the fight." Claire clenched her jaw, torn between the peaceful life she craved and the warrior the world refused to let her stop being. The restaurant had been just one moment, but it had pulled her past into her present like a tide she couldn't fight. For now, though, she was still the woman who had ended a threat in 17 seconds flat, and as far as the world was concerned, that was enough. She walked back into her house, her thoughts heavy. She had no idea if she could still outrun her past, but she knew one thing for sure: if anyone else came for her, she was ready. The men at Bella's Bistro had learned it the hard way: strength doesn't always come with a warning, and sometimes the quietest person in the room is the deadliest. So the next time you think someone looks vulnerable, remember Claire Donovan, the Navy SEAL who taught 3 men the most unforgettable lesson of their lives in just 17 seconds. Where are you watching this from? Drop your city or state in the comments. I'd love to know which part of the country you're tuning in from.